Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Juma Mubarak. Revolutionary greetings, brothers and sisters. Gonna be just me for this one. Right at 4 o'clock my time. I have to cut out just slightly before 4:59 at the latest, so that I can upload and meet the 1 hour requirement. This tabletop talk is about intercommunalism in today's era of Zionism and globalization. In today's era where the primary contradiction is not U.S. imperialism, and I am opposed not just to U.S. imperialism, but realize America is an artificial bank altogether, but realizing that Zionism, Jewish supremacy, Jewish finance capital, and globalization are the primary contradiction in the world today. That things are not acting the way they did in the 60s and 70s. A love for Dr. Huey P. Newton, a love for Malik al-Shabazz, rahimahullah, Malcolm X, but realizing that we need to be dialectic and the struggle continues. So we're going to look at the life of times of Dr. Huey P. Newton, look at the way the enemy destroyed his soul over the years, that he still remains the greatest New African sociologist of all time and a treasure for the people, and updating that, some candid discussions on where I have severe differences of opinion with the intercommunal theory while still loving and upholding the revolutionary ancestors and the work they did. Communism and socialism can essentially, since its origins, be defined in two categories. What Hitler pretty much rightfully called Judeo-Bolshevism and national communism. So the most extreme aspect of one would be Leon Trotsky, and then to its counter-synthesis would be Nkrumah, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, Mao, Castro, etc. Two very different pushes, one being towards Zionism and a false universalism promoting cosmopolitanism that is very dangerous to us as an ideology today, and the other being front runners to revolutionary processes, more willing to reconcile with the spirituality of their people and to defend the ethnic character of their people while also being proletarian internationalists. What in Korea they refer to as the unity and independence of people. We do not want the communist international. We reject this sort of globalism, but we do love each other and we want a profound solidarity. Dr. Huey P. Newton, as my son Khalid, before the state conspiracies came down on me about 6 months ago, stated with me, approaching one of the Eids at the time, Dr. Huey P. Newton is probably the greatest New African sociologist. The Black Panther Party in its day made a lot of mistakes. I certainly differ strongly with him on the lumpen vanguard theory. That was, in my opinion, a mistake, and I would say that forces like the Nation of Islam had a more advanced line on this question. But Dr. Huey P. Newton really put some muscle on the ground, and he really galvanized the hearts and minds of his people like no other leftist revolutionary force in all of American history. Nothing. There's nothing that compares to the Black Panthers in its era. I will say, brothers and sisters, I think it's antiquated, and you shouldn't try to recreate that experience because things have evolved. So grow from that, love that, and build. Be a Panther. I love New African Panthers, teaching my children that they're Muslim first, New African second, socialist third, and Cascadian nationalist fourth, building that intercommunalism, promoting a intersectionalism that is superior to the white leftist intersectionalism, building, real true fighting solidarity. So what does intercommunalism mean to us today? A lot. But we need to be dialectical about it. First, we need to understand where intercommunalism comes from. And there's no questions that Dr. Huey P. Newton was a brilliant sociologist in his own right and a creator, not just a parrot, he was a true creator. But intercommunalism at its source is Juche, not Maoism, Juche. What Dr. Newton and I have in common is we both got to spend time in Pyongyang with social scientists. In my opinion, if we were to look at all of the revolutions of the last 150 years, since the struggle against white world colonialism to today, Korea is at the top. And not just at the top, they're the first 11 spots. The first 11 spots. And then we talk Nkrumah, Nasser, Gaddafi, Fidel Castro, etc., etc. But the first 11 spots, and Mao would be up there, even with some ultra-leftism during the Great Proletarian Culture Revolution and things. But the first 11 spots are for Korea. You could almost only study Korea and nothing else and benefit from what you would study in everything else but not Korea. That's how much Juche dwarfs normative Marxian and normative national liberation experiences. Now, it would require one to be creative, and Dr. Newton realized this. America is nothing, not kind of like Korea. America is not like anywhere on earth in all of history. It's certainly not a mono-state, a mono-ethnic state where we're all Americans of the same complexion, nobody's a colonizer, etc., etc. Like Korea, it's much more complex and backwards and fragmented. So Dr. Newton, he came and he figured out, what is this synthesis between Mao and Marcus Garvey and Billy Bob in a trailer? Throw it all together, and what is the black power synthesis with brown power synthesis, with indigenous power synthesis, power blocks against hegemony, anti-hegemony power blocks. This is one of the great things about intercommunalism. It isn't multicultural kumbaya, but it is the solidarity of the world's people in a very real and concrete way. And this is important. You have to fight for your freedom first and foremost. Yes, I'm in solidarity with Gaza. I love Philistine. I've often wondered to the Lord why I couldn't be in Philistine right now to starve and fight beside them. In Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, our solidarity with Brother Maduro and his people against the red hat Aryan buffoon Donald Trump and its Zionist overlords attacking Venezuelan sovereignty, our solidarity with the Bolivarian dream, solidarity with Saheli forces, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Had a conversation a while back with a really good sister from the Nigerian embassy. Great people doing great stuff. But we're here, we're each in our land, and the best thing we can do to be proletarian internationalists is to liberate our people and to delink our people from capitalism and imperialism. And when we do that, that does more good for Gaza than a Gaza solidarity protest. Of course, we should still be doing anti-Zionist boycott work, education, etc. But best thing we're doing right now, Portland, we're going to stand down the National Guard. Allahu Akbar. Chirac, DC, we're going to stand them down. Allahu Akbar. Best thing we can do for Gaza is to defend our streets and to fight in our communities against Satan. See, Huey understood this. What Huey understood is that the National Guard, Homeland Security, and ICE agents are the IDF. They're all the great Satan. So Hamas and PFLP can smoke their ass here, and we'll stand up to them here. Yeah, we eventually need armed resistance in America. Not exactly there yet. If we're using this mass mobilizations to push the needle and not run to the Democrats, we're doing great stuff. Alhamdulillah. Organic street resistance. And I will always be eternally grateful to Dr. Newton for that. If I was to be frank, a lot of New African pantherism today is very dry, and it's a museum. I think that this is unfortunate, and there needs to be a push for a New African anti-globalization. This is why Brother Zahir and I do many conferences together. I really like where he's going. I also like where some of the more contemporary New Panther types are going. I like where a lot of Imam Jamil Al-Amin's people are going. I like Nkrumahs, but I feel like a lot of Nkrumahs now aren't savvy enough and are dry. We love each other. You can criticize me, I criticize you. We would bleed for one another. But let's create this massive nerd intellectualism against the conspiracy for anti-intellectualism. The Zionist enemy wants all of us to be Bart Simpson, Homer Simpson, and Fred Flintstone, to be stupid and to glorify it. Now, more than anyone on earth, this conspiracy is directed against the black man. I will give the black power forces that position. Absolutely, to make black folks think it's brilliant to be stupid and behave foul. But they're doing it to all of us. They're definitely doing it to rednecks. I've seen them. They're wandering around with red hats and they do not look intelligent. To Chicanos, etc. They want us to be dumb. And to praise that. See, as we get closer to the Lord and his destiny for our lives and wanting the best version of ourselves, everyone from Down syndrome to Einstein should consistently try to grow intellectually and spiritually every day. We're all at different levels with love and mercy towards one another, but always trying to be a little bit better than yesterday, or even a lot better than yesterday, until we're to a point that we're not just learning, we are able to be pan-synthesizing creators. Dr. Newton was a pan-synthesizing creator. In doing so, he made mistakes because people who act as sociologists and not just read sociology make mistakes. They don't get to go in time machines. And the world came at him. It came at him much like it is me. It destroys us through lumpenism and the past we bring with us from Jahiliyyah, from the streets. But he was a great creator. He was a creator brilliantly above any of the Marxist parties that have never gone anywhere. What he did with the Panthers was masterful. I wouldn't repeat the orthodox Marxist-Leninist framework. I would have a much more synthesized Jamahiriyaism, like Gaddafi with anarchism, that there would be a sort of decentralized New African Garveyite Tupac Shakurism like Brother Zahir is doing. But that was the era. In that era, it was Marxism, Leninism, hand in hand with national liberation. And they were contemporary. And unlike these Marxists today, they were genuine national communists. They were organic. They weren't factionalists. They were the revolution. It's heart and soul. They created it. And they deserve that kind of stature, whatever massive flaws, sins, and mistakes that they might have. Now, looking at intercommunalism, one of the most glaring sociological structural problems with it today, that is unworkable for us, and we need to be frank about it. We still uphold our revolutionary forerunners. We still love Huey. But is that today it is apparent to us by what we know now that Huey didn't then. The focus has to be on non-productive finance capital, not who owns the resources of the world and who owns the ownership of the means of production. That doesn't mean we don't want class warfare. Don't get me wrong. I'm not Mussolini. I'm not a fascist. I'm not for open-ended class cooperation. But the world is ruled today through transnational finance capital, largely controlled by Jewish banking cartels. But there are other bad actors, of course, in this sort of globalized era. So I've seen a lot of questions where there's a a lot of youth across a lot of ideological, ethnic, and religious spectrums. And they're wanting to figure out what is my place in all of this. What is my place in intercommunalism? The thing is this proletarian army of the Lord thesis I'm developing is three-dimensional, so my advice to you will not be exactly the same as my advice to the next young person. I'm going to say something to a Jewish Maoist that's accelerating that is different from a neo-Nazi who's getting a come to Jesus lecture from Harriet Tubman and Walid, and another discussion with a New African sort of scholarly youth on how do we be contemporary for globalization. I'm frustrated, Walid, how do we be edgy for today and untangle today's knots that were not in the 60s? So it's not linear. We're each going to have a kind of different starting point in this three-dimensional untangling of globalization. And I'll somewhat briefly break it down for you each line by line. Okay, first we need to understand how globalism works, Jewish apartheid, essentially. We could beat around the bush, but that's really what it is. I'm not saying that if your friend Sarah doesn't control the banks, you shouldn't be her friends, but globalization directly has Jewish ethno-religious imprints in it, not just Zionist Jewish. If we said Zionist, we would only be talking about Jewish nationalist colonial ambitions, but this is Jewish supremacy that's often not directly related to Zionism, that's related to financial oligarchy and cultural enslavement towards fragmentation. It's more accurate to say Jewish supremacist than Zionist in a number of these cases, if we're not talking about their grievous, atrocious ethnic cleansing behavior in 1948 Palestine or the Arab world. So what's happening with globalization? Unlike the 60s, so the 60s you have a straightforward national liberation movements, Algeria, Vietnam, Ghana, etc., versus and the socialist bloc and the third world sort of non-aligned socialist blocs, your Nassers and things and Titos, versus white world colonialism and imperialism and the far right. So the more left you go, the more revolutionary, and the more right you go, the more reactionary. That is absolutely not even kind of how the world works today. Not even a little bit. In fact, I think the 60s, they thought it worked that way a lot more than it really did. Hindsight's a bitch, and it's 2020, so we give our revolutionary forerunners a lot of slack. There'll be somebody that gets to be analytical of my ideas if I'm even that relevant enough in 60 years that I won't see, and that's from the fact that we're human beings and this is a science. So in today's era, it is a complete assault on national character all together. Not just the periphery, not just the so-called third world, and then also, Eastern Europe that's not imperialist, even though it's European. Look at America. There are Qatari military bases here. All of the decades, slogans throughout the third world to drive out American military bases. We brought one in here. This Peckerwood cosplaying as a patriot brought in Arab military bases to fucking Idaho. He's a prostitute. He ain't making anything great again. He literally made a prostitute deal. They gave him a $1 billion airplane, and now we have Arab military bases. We have people here who fanatically hate Arabs, justifying military bases on their soil, even though they're supposedly American firsters, because they got paid a lot of money. So basically, I'm a hooker. You can buy my national sovereignty. I'm a slut-shaming hooker. I'm going to be a little extra harsh on a 22-year-old's sexual life choices, while I myself will prostitute my national sovereignty. Now I'm an intercommunalist. I understand that America isn't actually real. It's a bank. But America is real to them, and this real nation to them, they're willing to sell it for money. See, it's a whole different game. You didn't have David Dukes and Putins and the Taliban and Hamas and Hezbollah, right-wing anti-globalist, anti-American forces in Eastern Europe, Latin America, etc. Your Saheli anti-colonial forces don't operate exactly like Nkrumahism. It's a different kind of contemporary anti-neocolonialism. Everything is much, much different. It's more complex. It's less based on left and right than having an anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist compass and seeing what's driving the needle forward and what's driving the needle backwards. And sometimes your friend is your enemy. So a lot of amazing contradictions. I have a problem with my phone because I'm old. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask while I'm in here? Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. What I'm envisioning, especially because I was looking before the state took my parental rights away, at teaching my oldest child, my middle child, who is the sociologist of the bunch. Each child has its sort of own skill set. New African anti-globalization. Islamic anti-globalization, because my goodness, our Muslims here are just as bad as Jews and just as bad as evangelical Christians, like horrible. Like we're pointing fingers about how to go to heaven, but then we are raping Eloise and we all work together to overthrow Brother Gaddafi. What I was working at, that edgy anti-globalism. So where does New African identity fit in today? How does Garveyism work today? For example, I agree with a lot of Garveyite and Nation of Islam and some of the Sunni black Muslim ideas with small businesses and communities. In their day, I think it's freaking pointless now. Because if Billy Bob's business goes down, so will yours. Globalization and corporate dominance are making a lot of those formulas obsolete, in my opinion. I don't agree with the white Marxists who are just straightforward capitalists in a linear way, who don't understand how small black capitalism can actually advance revolutionary processes. I'm three-dimensional on this. But I think today we are stuck with socialism and just being more straightforward and leftist. We have to be leftists that are critical of the Jewish question. This Leninist crap about anti-Semitism laws, that's on the trash. We're not going to do this thing where we talk about white privileges and a Jew whose daddy has another zero on his check over my daddy's check isn't up for review too. We're not going to be racist. We're going to be fair. We want young Jewish anarchists and communists to come join us and hug us and fist bump. And I'll probably go down today and love and hug on some. So it's not open-ended. I'm a little bit less of a left-wing David Duke Walid and more that Walid intercommunalism. But we do need to be straightforward that this is something that has to be pushed much harder. There's no reason that we're throwing free passes about concerns for your feelings when 75% of your in-group isn't just Zionists, they're openly genocidal. Like, genocidal. That's right. That's worse right now than the Trump camp of the white devil. A lot worse. So we should be proportional in our approach to that. Well, like I said, giving dynamism to those young Jewish kids who, with the Lord's mercy, are wanting to do some good things in the world and just live their best life. So there's a lot more just straightforward, real talk on the Jewish question to intercommunalism today, in my theory, where there's going to be a lot of J word that was just straightforward W words before. There has to be some updates for the fact that the white devil is assimilating rapidly. In my family, I definitely have indigenous blood in me. It's from my mom's side, my grandmother, but mostly white, Aryan, Peckerwood, Walid. You can see a little bit of Navajo in my cheekbones, but I'm mostly Germanic looking. But of this white thing, it's now producing multiple new African and Jamaican babies. That's our tribe today. So whiteness is dying insofar as it's not a race, not a nationality, not an ethnicity. It's a colonial paradigm. Once you get contaminated with just anything at all, for some reason you're not white anymore the way you would be, New African and Irish at the same time, but you can't be black and white at the same time. So this is going away anyways. I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of those 60s polemics. I think that slow your roll is going to help us accelerate the anti-colonial polemic. So that would be my first argument. My second argument is a whole lot more J words and being critical of leftist views on J words. So my third argument is everything comes down to localized streets. So we would take Huey's theory and we're talking a Juche where Atlanta is New African, Portland is like an autistic gay hippie, and LA has got a Aslan character, New African character, Chirac having that New African character, amongst others. And each localized streets detaching from a federal center. This has to be our playbook. We're not trying to change the system from within. We're thinking more and more along the lines of Viet Conging the devil in our local communities. So we're together, but we're also using this Juche playbook as self-reliance. It's not even an American revolution. It's not even a cohesive New African or Chicano revolution. There should be that. There should be these New African, Chicano, and indigenous groups. But things are situationally different city by city because of how vast and different America's streets are. And we're not trying to take down the belly of the beast. And it's not the belly of the beast. That was the 60s conclusion. It's been proven wrong today. It outsourced all its productive forces to the third world for cheaper labor. An actual Roman Empire wouldn't do that. It would purely export from the periphery. It would colonize and bring in. This doesn't do that. It's another indication that Jews, not white people, run U.S. imperialism. It's another ethno-religious marker that your ruling class isn't chauvinistic to what it claims to represent, but towards something else. But at the same time, what will you see? There's a government shutdown. People are not eating. Food stamps are being cut down. Money's still being sent to the Zionist entity. Money's still being sent to Ukraine. Money's still being sent to employ ICE agents and Homeland Security to be sick'em dogs in our streets. They're clearly not loyal to us, not even in a chauvinistic way. They're clearly not loyal to white people. The white devil. No, they gave the white devil raghead military bases. So you come to Oregon and, hi, I'm Walid and I'm the Aryan raghead. You go to Idaho, hey, I'm whoever, and I'm a Qatari raghead. That's what they are. They're a joke. They're hilarious. It's sad. This is why I talk to them right now in the way that wouldn't have been appropriate in Huey's day. We are talking more and more about Chang Mao alliances. There wouldn't have been something like that in Huey's day. It wouldn't have been appropriate, particularly for a paradigm against white world colonialism. Today, the white devil is in ruins much more than the left realizes, and its paradigm is often reactionary, and we see this today. The idea of thinking America is something real, and that colonial victims, Mexicanos, Central Americanos, and Caribbean people are invaders. We still see this backwards in this, where Westernism is basically multicultural white nationalism. And that's very true. The left is correct on that. But look how when you move away from that question, both the Western and then the anti-American leftist and third worldist forces are both being attacked by the same Jewish Zionist globalist overlords at the same time. So even though the Western and anti-American paradigms ultimately are going to have to clash. Maybe. I kind of think that the Western paradigm just gets race mixed out of existence eventually. There is a on-the-ground reality for a Chang Mao alliance against Jewish global dictatorship, Zionism, globalization, promoting rebuilding productive forces in America. But the problem is we are going to have to put forward principles to the proverbial white devil on where we can't have alliances. That the ethnic character of Chicano, Central Americano, and Caribbean people is non-negotiable. That would be the prime one. I think sexually related, be like, who cares who's humping who? Let's put that question to the side. That's going to be an easy sell. But then we can start talking about grievances from your Ron Pauls and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlsons and David Dukes. And yeah, he's kind of obnoxious, but Nick Fuentes, realizing Zionist Jewish power over America, driving us into war. And it's interesting because you'll have things where the true left is fighting liberals because we don't want to give Zelensky our money. We don't want to send money to so-called Israel. Neither do these rightists who are rapidly accelerating against Donald Trump. So our intercommunalism changes today rapidly because of the nature of the vastness of Jewish money power, of financial capital's power over productive forces in the West. It changes much of our playbook A to Z. Liberals are now reactionaries and the enemy. There is no basis for a liberal left progressive paradigm. That's why it consistently has gained us absolutely nothing in 60 years. Nothing. You think your head through. What has it gained us? Nothing. It gained us nothing. It actually slowed us down. We're looking at what pops this great Satan in the nose. That's the alliance. It's much more of a Royal Rumble of who wants to suck this sucker in his nose. Just sock him real good. That's how our alliance forms. It's not so much a kumbaya of we all think and act alike. It's who wants to be killer, more jiggy, more take great Satan and behead him. For different reasons. And realizing that a lot of this is pragmatic alliances, and we might even wind up fighting each other down the road. But Zionism absolutely destroying us across the board. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to jump in? Any thoughts? All right. Assalamu alaikum.